5 of our user groups have come together along the East Coast to bring you the BIM XT network. Our hope is to provide a live forum for people to share and connect on processes and tools related to building modeling processing. Today's topic is project coordination and collaboration. We will hear from 2 industry experts on their experiences on how teams can collaborate and coordinate on projects remotely, outside of the studio and off-site. Then we would like to hear from you about your experiences. Each presenter will give a 10-minute presentation, and we will follow up with a 10-minute Q&A discussion to wrap the call up around 2 p.m. Eastern today. A common response that we've gotten from our surveys is the discussion is one of the best things about this meeting. Not only our presenter, but with all of you, the entire audience of experts. We want this to continue to be a conversation, so please utilize the chat tools and let us know if you'd like to go live with either your comments, your experiences, or your questions. A few tips on those who are not familiar with Zoom. In the upper right hand of your corner, you can see you can toggle between gallery mode and presenter mode. This will actually allow you to scroll through and see all of the faces on the call. Your video controls are on the lower left hand of the screen. If you're okay with it, please share your face. And today we actually have a themed virtual background. The best will receive a $25 Amazon gift card. So please update your virtual background to a virtual or rendered image, which is today's theme. Please utilize the chat tools, and you can actually open the chat window down at the bottom of the Zoom window. It looks like a little text message, if you will. Once again, we hope this event is a resource for you to connect with building modeling experts. As you may have noticed, all of you are muted. We have Nick Sipes from Baltimore, Maryland, monitoring the chat, and he will be aggregating the questions from the audience. Once again, you have the option to be unmuted and ask the questions yourself, or have me ask the question for you. Either is fine. When asking your question, please let us know where you're calling from today. Our goal is to inform, educate, and socialize issues in a unique and fun experience. We will be flexing the Zoom platform to create a more collaborative environment online as we evolve the network events. This is our 3rd event, so please let us know if you have any suggestions on how we can improve the value of this experience. We do plan to have one of these once a month for the remainder of the year. The in-person city-based user groups will start up eventually, hopefully, right? This event is intended to be in addition to those groups, so we hope to see you live in the future. You are the audience and the participant, so please turn on your video, play with some virtual backgrounds, and say hello to those you know, as we have a conversation about what has changed since we have all now went virtual. First today, we have David Fersh, an architect at SmithGroup that works with the Technology and Practice Group. Hey, David. Oh, that's Noah.
Hey, Dana.
David has a new home in Vienna and a new baby. How has quarantine been treating you with the growing family?
Oh, it's been going good. It's definitely a challenge at times, but it's been great to get to spend the time home with the baby girl. And working on getting her fitted with a VR headset. It's still going to be a little bit.
There you go. A little baby one. So what can you tell us about SmithGroup and how we collaborate and coordinate virtually?
Sure. Let me pull up my presentation here and share the screen. And I'm gonna share one technology in particular that has become very helpful in our current setting as this gets pulled up.
And actually, we do really like to know, one thing that we've gotten some really cool feedback on is where everybody's from. So while he's getting prepared, you guys could let us know where you're calling from today. We've actually had quite a few people come in our previous sessions from outside of the USA. And it looks like we do today too, at least one, which is very cool. About 64 people, give it another second. All right. So sharing the results here. And as you can see, Virginia, my home state, the most populated there. North Carolina, Maryland. And we would love to know where you're calling from if it's not listed or outside of the US. So please share that with us. All right. So Dave, what do you have for us today?
All right. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've been collaborating virtually. So as Dana mentioned, I'm an architect at SmithGroup, and I help work with our technology and practice team. I have sort of a split role, practicing on projects and working on technology, and I lead our visualization group, which does all things about how we present our work. So whether that's internally, how we're finding new design tools and presenting and understanding our spaces that we're designing, or externally with a client presentation. So things like rendering tools and AR and VR and 3D printing. So I get to do all kinds of fun stuff. At SmithGroup, I like to think we've been all in on VR for a long time. So I've got a whole nother presentation where I could tell you, all day why I think VR is so important. And I won't talk about that much today, just to say that I think it's a different way of experiencing space and having a spatial understanding for especially folks that maybe aren't, working on buildings every day, and even those that are. So this is a few of our different offices around the country. We have a permanent VR setup in every space around the country. SmithGroup's a big firm, right? So we have offices, we're up to 15 offices around the country and in Shanghai. So a couple of years ago, that made us think about how we could, improve the way we're working in VR. And it really made us think about how we could do collaboration in virtual reality, right? We have lots of large projects with cross-office, cross-discipline teams. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got started with collaborative VR, and it made a lot of sense for us at the time. But I think given our current environment, COVID sort of forcing everyone at home, this now makes so much sense for so many people. So bear with me for a second here. I think it was maybe AU 2018, and I remember just spending a good portion of my time walking around and trying to see all the different collaborative VR tools. I knew it was something that we wanted to do. There's so many different options out there, and I would encourage everyone to sort of take a look for themselves to see the advantages and disadvantages of different tools. For us, there were a few considerations that we wanted to think about as we were deciding what type of platform to use. And for me, the most important was ease of use. It's at a couple different levels. So one is, how quickly can we move from a design model into virtual reality and have, collaborative discussions in that space, right? And we're talking about, when I'm talking about collaborative VR, I'm talking about people in different areas physically coming together in one digital space and being able to talk and see what's going on. There's a lot of different options that go with that, but to me, some tools were easier than others to get in. So it doesn't really work as a design tool if you have to put a hard stop on the design process to get it prepared for a meeting, right? So if there's a week of lag time for model optimization and materiality updates, that doesn't really work in a smooth design process. It works, can work for a client presentation or for a very specific need, but I want it to be a little more flexible. User interface as well, right? So if we want different team members to be able to go in, it needs to be intuitive. People need to be able to use it, understand it right away. It can't be a super steep learning curve. Model interactivity is really important. So if we're exporting out, a Revit model, what kind of data comes with it? Do I have, information that can be valuable to me in VR? Can I control things like design options or layers so I can have different options coming up to review? Markup and measurement tools, things like that interactivity. So can I mark things up? Can I see, that feels like it might be too big. Well, it's 2 foot 6 inches. That seems about right. Visual quality is another that can vary greatly. Right, so what do those materials and lighting look like? Can I change the lighting for different times of day? Can I understand what this lobby is going to feel like in the winter versus summer, as well as the avatars? So that's kind of a fun one. if you're looking at the images here, it goes sort of from the bottom right, which is NVIDIA's holodeck, has these sort of futuristic robotic characters, that move around to, I think my favorite is the top left, which is the wild, which is sort of this abstraction, they create your body and your hands with these horizontal lines. But, the important thing is you actually get a lot of body language just by seeing your hands and your head. So if you can track others' hand movement and head movement, it makes a really big difference in the way that you're talking with each other. If you're pointing at things or where you're looking, you'd be surprised what a difference it really makes to be able to be in that space. And then the output. So, how are we getting information out of these meetings? So is there issue creation? Does it link to BIM 360? Are there meeting notes that are made from it? So they all have differing levels of how these areas function, but those are the things that we really looked at as important. And so this is one of our first collaborative VR meetings, and you'll notice that this was prior to COVID. I think this was maybe in February. And this is actually using Prospect VR, which is made by Ayers. And the way we're set up actually is we've got both a conference call going. So we're connecting different conference rooms. So this is the DC office pictured, but on the TV, you see the Detroit office, and actually in a little corner, the Ann Arbor office. We have 3 offices linked together. That's me in the top left corner. I'm in an Oculus Rift S. Sven is on the right, he's in an Oculus Quest, and then Danyup and Peter are in the foreground here, and they're both on their computers. They're actually joining as well. So, and then you can see on the right all these different avatars sort of grouped together, all looking at the building at the same time and being able to communicate. So when we thought about this originally, there were a few different methods that we were looking at. So the simplest is casual design discussion. We thought that might be good for the Oculus Quest, which is, this guy here. If anybody's used these, it's very simple. It's completely wireless. There's no computer involved. And actually, Dana, I think we had a poll question maybe about what hardware folks are using if they're using it.
So yes, absolutely. There you can see if you guys use a headset at your company or maybe even at home, right? Which do you use? Give you a few minutes there. But I know that this is completely different. Even if you think about the first images we saw at the different SmithGroup offices where everybody is kind of just looking at someone with the headset on, right? It's like they get to experience this awesome virtual, three-dimensional world. And, maybe they're making comments, maybe they're pointing at things as they're going through, and you have no idea what they're looking at, right? So I think you're right. The gestures and the hands and being able to see that within the environment definitely make a huge, huge benefit there. All right.
Yeah.
We've had about a minute. We'll end the poll here. Share the results. So yeah, it looks like a lot of people are using the Vive and the Oculus Go, or just the cardboard. Pretty standard stuff there. But we also do have a pretty good mix of use.
Yeah, nice.
So that's really cool.
Very cool to see. And, there's lots of different headsets out there, but and they all have different advantages. And so one thing here was we sort of had this whole idea of being able to use our Rift and our Vive and our conference room, but really what we discovered is once everybody went home, the environment changed, right? So we don't have laptops typically for most of our team members that can support VR. We do have some travel VR kits that we sort of send out for special meetings and traveling. But what we ended up doing was buying a bunch of Quests and giving one to everyone on the team. So there are some limitations. Awesome.
I want to be part of that team.
Yeah, I mean, it's an investment. I mean, they're like $400 each. So, 5 members of the team, $2,000. But it's not a crazy investment, to make to sort of change the way you're working.
Especially when you think about if you have to do, airfare typically, if you're having to, travel to go see somebody. I mean, it's actually a substantial amount of savings, and you just can't collaborate any other way that's more efficient, right? So it's, I think, going to be paid off in that first meeting, probably, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a really good point. Something I was going to say is our client for this particular project is based in Blacksburg. And those of you that are, Hokies probably know there's not a great way to fly into Blacksburg.
Roanoke Airport.
We've got a team coming from Detroit, some from DC, some from Ann Arbor. So, just saving. And so what we're doing is we're actually sending our client a quest as well. So I've actually working on setting that up to get sent out to them today. But so the hope is that they'll be joining these VR meetings. So it's not only sort of an internal design tool, but also this way to interact, more robustly with the client team. And so this is just saying, well, we can do it anywhere. This was me last week joining one of our meetings. I was actually down at the beach in the Outer Banks and had to join a meeting, but it was okay because I brought my Quest with me and I found a quiet spot, and you can really join from anywhere. And then just a couple clips of us in action. So I cut the sound out of these, but the team is talking to each other as we review different options. So here we're looking at a design, and the really cool thing is you can experience the space, and you're also free to move all around. So to understand what that looks like from the inside, and then go back and look, there are the other folks that I'm talking to. They're still standing on the interior of that space, and I can sort of understand spatially, what this looks and feels like. So there's also, the ability to mark up and talk through. We can take screenshots as we're working and make notes off of that. So this has been really exciting to see come together. It's one of those tools that, as I'm sure many people on this call maybe have felt that, I pushed and pushed and pushed, and it took sort of a disaster happening to make people so excited to accept it and work with it. So now that everyone is at home, I sort of see limitless potential in this. So it's really exciting for me to see come together, and I think it's going to have a lasting impact even, past when we're all back in the office together.
And David, we do have a pointed question, excuse me, from Asim. Thank you for your question, Asim. Do you mean design team? So you were mentioning 5 people. Is it the design team for this specific project? I know it's pretty early on in the process.
Yeah, so we did identify sort of core members that would be joining in VR. That's like the core design team. As we move into documentation and further along, there will be a larger team. I don't know that we're going to be able to get everybody on the sort of larger team a headset, but the nice thing with Prospect is you can join from a desktop as well. It's not as good as being in VR. So right now that's where we are. I certainly hope as the technology gets better and better, especially on the GPU side and things come down in price, that in the future everyone on the team will have a VR headset. I see that coming, and especially because we don't really want to share things like that right now. So we'll see.
Awesome. Well, anyone else have any questions? Or Asim, did that answer your question, or would you like to pop in and give some feedback? Anybody else?
And I would say that we are doing, this was the architectural design team, I should say, because there also is a much larger MEP team, sites team, landscape team. So yes, there's a much larger team. This is sort of a very focused group within the team.
Because it's so early on in this specific project, do you see the team growing as it, in terms of who's in VR, especially when we get to coordinating issues and those types of things? Are we going to invest more into the headsets and different things like that?
I hope so. I mean, we'll have to see. One of the nice things is that when we're in the office, anyone can go into VR anytime and hop in, and we have more options. I think
you could of course just join from your the meeting, right? And kind of see, like you were showing in the conference room, you could be on your laptop, you can be on a tablet, you can really be in many different forms, and that's kind of the best way of collaborating within VR.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a huge advantage of actually being in the headset. Mm-hmm. It's just sort of a capacity issue. So we'll see. We'll see if I'm able to get my hands on the checkbook and we buy some more.
Absolutely.
Can
Absolutely. Well,
I
thank you
ask a
so much,
question?
David. Absolutely. Please.
Do you have to do anything when you're sending out those quests to clients and stuff to like any warnings and like what spaces they should be in, to make sure they're not, getting hurt while reviewing it if they're walking around and in space? What can you recommend for that?
We haven't sort of given them, as far as safety while using a VR headset, or do you mean like seeing things in the model that we might not want them to see? Because I think both are.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that second one. No, I just want to make sure they aren't like, in their house and like falling down the stairs or something, just sort of if there's guidelines or anything that you tell them.
Or like, hey, warning, this may cause nausea. And, which I know a lot of people experience.
So we do our best to send them good models that don't cause nausea, first of all. So like bad and that's or something real on the Quest, because as models get bigger, it's hard for them to process it. And then it gets a little jumpy and it can be nauseating. So that's on us to some degree to make sure we're sending them good content. The safety stuff, I think we rely on. Oculus has some like standard language and like warnings that you have to click through when you open the headset. So we're going to do a training with them, like I'll hop on a conference call and walk them through using it. I'm sure I'll talk through, make sure you have a space, make sure you're not next to a set of stairs. I'm going to try not to involve our lawyers in any liability issues. And so we'll just keep it quiet on that front, I think. But I think it's common sense, and Oculus has sort of their set of regulations.
Awesome. Well, next, we actually have a question from Andy Brack. And Andy asks, would you broadcast, excuse me, for a VR meeting through Zoom or WebEx? And do you have any lag issues?
So we have done, so for instance, that first image I showed when we were in the office, that was a WebEx meeting in which we also had VR going. So the way we do that typically, and again, we're using prospects, so every tool would be a little bit different, but we'll typically have one person that's on a computer, and they can sort of just be the cameraman to a degree, right? And they can share their screen to others. And then people in the headset are sort of seeing it in real time. They're not relying on the WebEx connection, right, to see the VR model. But you've sort of got this third person point of view that's sort of visualizing the whole thing is how I would recommend when you're using WebEx or a similar tool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David, for sharing the presentation and showing all of us those cool tools. Definitely want to get into that for sure. So next, we have Noah Harburger. He's a senior associate and BIM manager at Ayers St. Gross. Noah comes to us from Baltimore, Maryland. We saw Noah a minute ago. How are you doing today, Noah, and how have you been spending your time during quarantine?
I am doing quite well, and I have lost almost all sense of what time is.
Yeah, is it Thursday? Is it Saturday?
Flow. Yeah, end of every Monday we get confused as a family together and be like, what day is it? Yeah, it's probably relatable to most.
Absolutely. So in what ways do teams at Ayers St. Gross collaborate and coordinate virtually?
So we have a lot of overlap. We do use VR internally with clients and amid design teams. But what I'm going to be talking about is our sort of model coordination, something that a lot of us already do using Navisworks, but a way that we can more easily coordinate across the project, and some of the tools that we have started using that track those issues as we go. And what we have found is that a lot of these tools that we had started using just because they were quick and efficient also had the benefit of being super helpful when working remotely and keeping issues in the project in front of people and easily able to be found without necessarily having to be together in a conference room looking at a set of drawings together. So I am going to share my screen. and take you over to this. Is that up for everyone? Or
Sure
at
is.
least for you, Dave? Okay, great. Okay. All right, so we use Navisworks to do our basic clash detection, but we've been using BIM track for the past year as a way to take that clash detection into issue tracking throughout the project. So right off the bat, when you're still working in Revit, built into our template as a sort of time-saving matter, we have Navisworks export views set up in the template. So any project you start using our template has exports for architecture, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, and structural. And it isn't reliant on the linked models. It's the content being displayed. So if you have structural things in your architectural model, they will, show up in that export. So you need to make sure, at a work set level, you're controlling that if it's not the correct data. But that way, mechanical, the MEP model might be a single model, but you really want to break it out into the sort of sub parts for these exports. So it's really quick. When you have Navisworks installed, you also have, this was just sort of showing some of the visibility settings for those different views set up. But when you're ready to do a clash detection, you can really quickly go to the export feature, and when you've got Navisworks installed, it has this NWC export option that isn't there if you don't have Navisworks on your computer, though it is possible to install as a separate add-in. So when you have that NWC exporter, you get a pop-up thing of options, and these are the ones that we do. We want to make sure element IDs are coming through. We want all the element properties visible in Navisworks. We want linked files to come through so that we're not having to do these exports in all of the aggregate files. We just want to do it all in our one main file that we've got all of the links coming into. And we want to use the current view because that current view is the templated view with all of the settings we wanted. And we want to cut it up by levels, divide file into levels, so it's easier. Now, the one I'm going to be demonstrating today, because it's the one that was most recently done, that project team had a lot of weird and funky levels that you wouldn't necessarily expect in the building. So we'll see some of the effect of that in a little bit. I can't avoid. But for the most part, we're just talking about like level 1, level 2, level 3 in your project. So when you come into Navisworks, if you don't do all these sort of like template setup, it can take a long time to get started. Unlike Revit, where you can just start a project using a template, Navisworks doesn't have that like new project use template. So what you have to do is that first time you're thinking of how you're going to set this up to save time in the future, you have to set up selection sets that you're not picking object types, you're searching for objects of certain categories. So if new ones come or go, it's still going to find everything that's there. You can save those selection sets as XML files, and then you can use them when you're using your clash detection tests. So right now in this one, it's showing I've got no clash tests, but I can go in and import that XML file of clash detection tests, which utilizes selection sets, and it'll all populate really quickly. And so when you take the time to set these up, save them out on any new project that's ready to do a clash detection process, from the time I start exporting those NWC files out of Revit to the time I have my report in hand of these are all the clashes in the project I want to look at, is maybe 30 minutes versus the like half day or full day it would normally take to set all those parts up from scratch each time.
And essentially, if you were to do that, let's just say that, the first time you don't have any selection sets, those can be saved out, right, Noah? So that
Yeah,
the
that's what I'm saying.
next time,
So you
yeah.
can, yeah. So that first, this, if you don't have any of the setup, that first project you're gonna take to do it right, you're gonna save out your selection sets. You're gonna
And of course,
save
you could
out
do your
your
templates and run
clash
it.
tests. And also the last one is I'll talk about in a moment, the appearance profiler. So
Awesome.
right here is the place where you would import the clash tests. And when you import the clash tests, it will also, if you're using selection sets for your clash tests, it'll bring those in all together at once. So these are the clash tests we do at ASG. You might not need to be as extensive, but we just find breaking them into these aggregate pieces can really speed things up and make sure that you're able to talk to the specific engineers about these specific issues really quickly, rather than having to try to keep a meeting with everyone involved when, the ducts to structure only has 2 issues, and most of them are happening in conflicts of mechanical pipes versus ducts or something. Well, that's a weird one for sanitary pipes versus ducts. There we go. So all of these, each of these categories would be a selection set. And basically, we are running a selection set of those elements that are fire protection against the selection set of structural framing. And when you import those, you can see on the right, now I've got all those clash tests available to me. And I can also load on the left there the appearance profiler. So not only am I bringing the tests in and the selection sets, but I can also control how things look in Navisworks, because by default, it's just sort of displaying the materials of the elements in Revit, if you are even exporting those materials. But you probably want to just from, most pipes all look the same, most ducts look the same, and if I want to know what's supply, what's return, what's exhaust, this is a way I can actually control that visibility in Navisworks. So using those same selection sets and data here, I can load a DAT file that I can save once I've done it the first time onto your network somewhere, so you can easily access it in the future. I can load it and run it, and it basically modifies the visibility, the look and appearance of all the elements in the project to have consistency across multiple clash projects that you're working on. So once you've loaded your file, your clash test, you can just hit the update all button and it will run through every single one of those and tell you what you've got. So, on this one, I had 106 ducts interfering with architecture, 108 structure interfering with architecture, and there's a good chance most of those are just ducts passing vertically up through ceilings and floors that I will be able to ignore. But I want to make sure there isn't, unfortunately, a way to say, hey, is this pipe running vertically through a ceiling, or is it running horizontally coplanar and through the ceiling? That's a problem. So you sort of have to look at all of them. It's just when you're reviewing them, you can go through them really quickly. Now in this view, I can see I clearly have more than just one pipe running into this footing here. So I don't want to have to review though 5, 6, 7 times spread out across, whatever random order the clash detection found them, and keep thinking, didn't I review this already? Didn't I review this already? So the next step is using a tool to group your clashes so that you can speed up that process. Now, this is the first time. Everything I've set up until this point is just Revit and Navisworks. Okay, so this group clashes tool up on the top left comes as part of BIMtrack. And it's also a plugin you can just purchase separately. If you didn't want to buy BIMtrack, you can buy the group clashes add-in for Navisworks. I think it's like $10 or something. And then you've got this capability. I think I actually had done that, which is why it's on a separate tab instead of as part of the BIMtrack tab. But that's sort of beside the point. The tool is the same. And when you click on group clashes, you can select all of your tests. Say, I want to group these based on level and grid intersection. You can also do these like by object A versus object B. There's different ways you can choose to group them, but just ease of organization, I like to do this by level and grid intersection. That way it gets everything in a general area in a group together. And let's see, I think a couple of those we had over 100 clashes, and after running the groups, it's down to like 40 and 60 in those two categories. And where there had been 14 specifically in the sanitary and vent pipes versus structure, it's only dropped to 11. So we've only like gotten 3 things to group together because they're spread out pretty far around the building, which is fine. It lets you know that you don't have a ton all in one area. But these 3 are all, sharing a grid intersection in terms of their closest thing. And now that's going to save me a little time. The number of clashes I'll have to go through will be greatly reduced now as I go through. So everything right now, because I just ran these tests, are listed as new. If I were to hit, run the test again, they'd all switch over from new to active. So the new and active category under the status here, whether it says new or active, either of those aren't really helpful to me. So when I do my review, I'm changing the status to either reviewed or approved. If there's a clash that, like I said, is a pipe just running vertically up through a ceiling, that's fine. We know about it, it's fine, not a problem. But if there's something that we want to look at with the team, or you want someone to fix, or at least another person will put eyes on to determine if it's a problem or not, we'd change the status to reviewed. So once you have all of those reviewed clashes, we can go in and open BIM track and pull down this issues tab and hit clashes to issues. And it'll take all of your clashes that you want and turn them into BIM track issues. So here I'm just checking off, I only right now want to do ducts versus structure and mechanical pipes versus structure, because those are the MEP people and the structural engineers are going to be looking, or the mechanical people and the structural engineers will be looking at these. I'm going to leave off the water pipes because that might be a different group. And I'm going to set my priority to high. I'm going to say that the disciplines are mechanical and structural. And I'm even going to set like notification to mechanical or structural, because when I added people to the project team in BIMtrack, I gave them categories of which trades they belong to. So just by doing this for an entire test, they'll get notified, hey, a bunch of things have just been added to BIMtrack, go take a look. And they can open up Revit and see these things. So once I've got my settings set up here, notice here I am checking only those reviewed items, because approved ones, they don't need to put those in the list. And new and active I haven't even looked at. And resolved, of course, I don't. So it's just reviewed are the ones that I want people to look at. I can go ahead and hit publish. And now I've got a list of issues. And this interface here on the right is the same interface if you're using Navisworks, if you're using Revit, even if you're using AutoCAD and you've got your coordinates set up properly, you can even do it with AutoCAD, Celibri. They've got plugins for a bunch, and actually just today I got an email saying they have a plugin. The plugin now works with Enscape. So if you do Enscape visualization, you can create issues right there native in Enscape, and we'll get to that in a moment too. So here I am still in Navisworks, and I'm looking at the list, and I'm looking through my high priority items. And I see this one here that like I really want to take a look at, and I can click view and model, and it'll take me right to that location. And if I'm not working in Navisworks, because I did what I needed in Navisworks, I created my glass detection, I created my issues. Now I just want to get to fixing the problems. I'm not going to fix those problems in Navisworks. I'm going to fix them in Revit. So the interface again is the same. I can click view and model. It'll put a this red translucent sphere over the place where the issue is. I've created, you can see at the bottom there, a work set dedicated to those spheres. So while I'm reviewing things in Revit, I'm on that work set. So when it generates these clash spheres, it puts them all on that dedicated work set.
The add-in creates the spheres?
Yes, the add-in will create the spheres.
That's interesting that they're actually three-dimensional modeled elements.
Yeah, so it generates them when you do it. And there's ways that if you don't want that happening, everyone on your project can uncheck a setting and it will suppress that feature. But one of the things, what it does by creating that sphere, when you go to view and model, it doesn't actually take you to this view, it takes you to that same perspective view that you saw in Navisworks. But in Revit, there's probably going to be a bunch of stuff in the way that you can't really see the clash well. But when you go click on view and model and it takes you to that perspective view and it creates that clash sphere is selected. And so I just click right away the section box, tool, and it takes me right here. And I can see exactly where the clash is. And these NWC models that the clash detection was done when the issue was created was from about a week ago. So now I can see right now that this duct has moved since that issue was first created, but it has not yet been resolved. So I'm not going to go in here and hit edit, resolved, whereas I can come back through here and check a number of these other things. And if the issue no longer exists because the mechanical engineer is going through this exact same list they have on their site because they have a license that we gave them, and they're on this project, they're seeing the exact same list. So they're taking things off as they resolve them. And they shouldn't even be in there, but if they miss one, it might still be on the list. This is one clearly still needs to be resolved. So there's ways to do this. There's categories like called confidentiality, where you can basically say, hey, I don't need everyone to see all 300 issues on the project. The mechanical engineers are only privy to the things that are given mechanical confidentiality, so their lists might only have 40 things on it. There are filtering abilities so you can narrow down your list to be, let me just look at the critical items. Let me just look at the high priority items. Let me just look at the things related to the ducts and structures. Like you've got the ability to filter your list to hone in on the type of work you're doing. But it's also something like that your project, you don't want to have to overwhelm your different project team members with a lot of stuff that isn't relevant to them. So all those features sort of are built into the software. And what we're finding is, not only does this nearly eliminate the need for having those long coordination meetings, because they get alerted, they have this list, they can go here and see it for themselves. It's highlighted with a big red bubble, and they know exactly what it is they need to do. That a lot of the issues just keep getting resolved, and we can put timelines on and say, I want, some of these things are really simple, I want them resolved in a week. And if there are things that require additional attention, you can edit and add notes and have a conversation that gets tracked through BIMtrack as well, that sort of conversation about elements, and the communication gets built in through that interface. But we found what was super useful actually extends outside of the model coordination clash detection world. Is just, hey, if I want someone to do something in the model, I notice something's wrong, I can just create an issue. So I'm actually going to get out of the PowerPoint here and go into the model. So this is the live model in Revit. And as an example, I'm just going to say, I'm looking here, I'm planning on doing a rendering of this space right here, and I realize nobody's bothered modeling, the return here. I'm going to be looking right into that plenum. I want somebody to fix this. So I can just go select the ceiling, go to my cropped view real quick and say, I want an issue. So I'm creating an issue. it has a little, thumbnail here. I want this to be like perfectly clear. So I'm going to even hit this edit. It's going to take me into like a old school MS Paint sort of thing. And I'm just going to circle in red with a thick line and say, hey, right here, I want them to close this. So I'm going to close, hit save, and the thumbnail, I don't know if you can see, it's pretty pixelated, but it has updated with that outline now. And I can say, close off plenum. And I'm going to, let's just assign this to me so I don't bother anyone else on this project team. This is super important. This person's going to get an email as soon as I hit publish. Anyone outside of the architectural group isn't even going to see that this issue is a problem. They won't even be able to find it. It's a request. It's open. I'm hitting publish.
I would imagine that not only for you and your team internally, this would be an amazing, issue tracking tool or kind of a task list, if you will. But this is also really something amazing to take to a meeting. If you're working with, as the architect, I'm working with the plumbing engineer, I can bring my specific list of issues, right?
Yeah, so any team member can check, like, if they've been assigned something, like, so if you do have coordination meetings and you're going over some of these lists, you might be not resolving it right there, but you're getting a sense of who's going to be taking on the solution. You can just start assigning those there. And so people can go and filter their list and see what's assigned to them, hit apply, and now we're only looking at this. So right now, the only thing on this list is I need to close off this plenum. And again, it's not going to matter if I'm in Revit or in Navisworks or in Enscape. This same thing can happen. So if you're, doing a tour of the model ahead of a client presentation and you're seeing issue after issue, we need to fix that, we need to fix that, we need to fix that, you're now, with the new plugin that they announced today, able to do just that. You can just create those issues right there in the model, and it'll take you there as you had viewed, in that same perspective view. So let's say if I close this again and go here and I say view and model, it will take me to the exact view that I'd been in before.
So with that, Jay Klein actually has a question. Do you still follow the traditional NWF to NWC workflow for Navis to allow engineers to view issues in the faster NWC model, or does this kind of nullify that process? BIM track is now the source of these issues.
Yeah, we have eliminated that. We don't push out separate NWC models. We create the NWC models up front as far as just to keep things lighter in Navisworks. Technically, we don't even have to do that. Like, because everything's through selection sets and not based on the models, like, we could just export all one giant Revit model with all the links. I still do it because it's a lot easier when clicking on things to have that sort of aggregation of the different trades in the Navisworks space. But since we are taking care of all of the issues live just in Revit and no longer really working in Navisworks and trying to find, you find an issue in Navisworks, you usually then have to rotate the model, zoom out to figure out where this is relative to the building, just to then find that same place in Revit. Or you're generating a list, copying an element ID, pasting it in search by element ID in Revit, finding it, and there are ways to get to that element, but it's like multi-step versus just click, take me there.
It looks like Rebecca Fisher, I'm not sure which company she's coming from, but she's an MEP, and her coworkers have worked with Ayers St. Gross and utilized BIMTrack and said that it's typically, it's a much faster workflow than the traditional Navisworks workflow, because you can fix the issue right then and there. Like you're saying, it's interoperable between all these programs. So thank you for your comment, Rebecca. Definitely backing up what she's with
Not lying.
Associates. Yeah. So, and very pointed to that question. So thank you for your feedback on that. Looks like we have Timothy Conroy with a few questions. So we're going to bring Timothy on to have a conversation with you, if that's okay,
Sure.
Noah. He has a few in here, and so definitely want to allow him to ask his questions.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Sure can. Hey, Tim.
Hey, so one thing that I know we've been struggling with over the last few months is the delineation between issue management and clash management. And we feel like in the past few years, we were always on the clash management, going through clash batches, creating clash groups, then creating the PDF or HTML reports.
Mhm.
We've found that moving away from that and kind of, the industry as a whole has come so far on that topic that as the GC, we no longer need to manage clashes. And so instead, we're focusing a lot more on managing issues. And so if the clash can be resolved by the trade partners, we don't need to discuss it. And so I guess my question is to you and to maybe the group over the chat is, does everyone agree, or does anyone feel that we shouldn't be creating the distinction between clashes and issues? Or do we think that it's best to say that we are issue managers, not clash managers?
So are you asking this from the position of a general contractor?
I would say either way. I mean, I am a general contractor, so I guess that's yes where I'm coming from, but
So I guess where I am coming from is, as architect, as project team, before we turn in a set of drawings for bid, if this is a traditional setup, this is all happening before that 100% CDs go out. We're starting this process like at maybe 75% DDs and making sure, and just doing a run, and then maybe 2 more times some big pushes during the construction document moments until we see that there isn't anything there. But as I was trying, like the once you have all the sort of built-in stuff there, the process of updating and checking to make sure you haven't created any new problems is pretty fast. But this was all, but it's all intended to be like making, covering our butts before we put the drawings out. Whereas I feel like a lot of the times the clash detection we're getting from the construction manager or general contractor is the last check before before you put the bids in, to make sure there isn't something that nobody has looked at that's going to be an issue. And I think that if we are doing our job, this is just a way that we can do our jobs better. But this isn't looking at the time, the order that things are getting installed, like that. I guess those are the issues. The sequencing can be the next thing that you guys are looking at, and knowing that the actual elements aren't trying to coexist. I think when during that initial review step, I'm literally just hitting the down button in Navisworks and like, is this a problem or not? Is this a problem or not?
Yeah.
And mass ignoring tons of things. They're like, this just isn't a problem. We're not even looking at things generally like that's less than 2 inches in diameter, because it can go somewhere. Like we can make it work. So we're trying to just look at the things that are going to potentially be harder. And if the team agrees, like, yeah, I modeled it here, there's plenty to be said for like what gets modeled and how it gets modeled, so that it becomes clear on the drawings versus how it's going to be installed. We all know that like pipes get modeled a lot further apart from each other than they need to get installed, so that they can be legible in the drawing sets. So if we come up with, if those sorts of clashes show up and we see there's plenty of space right next to this, like, that's fine. We just hit accept and move on. Like this is really just to focus on those issues that really are issues.
Yeah, hopefully as technology progresses and we move away from the paper copy, it kind of pains me to hear you say we're spacing pipes out because we're making it legible, when you've got infinite zoom on a PDF potentially. And so if we can move away from the kind of the old way of doing things. Right now we're kind of handcuffing ourselves at times because we're making it look right for print. And if
Yeah.
we don't need to print, then we don't need to bend over backwards to make it look right for print. The fact that we still have some 2D line work where like the details are drawn in 2D, that's where we get into sticky situations, because we leave the 3D world and we go into 2D to make things look right. And that's when things don't quite come together as they're supposed to, because we're
Right.
limiting ourselves. So
Well, it looks like, guys, we have a minute left. I definitely want to honor everybody's time. Looks like we have a topic for next month on issues versus clashes, because it looks like there's a lot to be said about those, a lot of comments. Jacob, do you want to take a second or two to give your input or your feedback on the question that was provided before?
Yeah, actually, just real quick with the issues versus the clashes, I say, Tim, you're right with trying to get the trades to do more on their end to resolve them. We actually set up a hierarchy now where we basically say these types of clashes, if it's electrical versus, plumbing, it's automatically associated to the electrical team, and they have to go through and find it. So we actually have a matrix that we basically run clash, figure out what the type of clash is, and then it's assigned automatically. We're not one by one assigning them. That way they're discussing more, and then we're coming back and discussing ones that really need it. And then BIMtrack also allows you to define different types, so you can actually customize your types to design issue, construction issue, owner issue, and be able to select those when you go in and do it.
Thanks, Jacob. Once again, looks like a lot of people have a lot of things to say about this portion of coordination, right? Issues, clashes, what happens during the design phase, what doesn't happen. I'm going to jump over to Victoria Lindsay and put her on the spot. She just asked a question, but I also want to congratulate her because she has won the prize for Best Virtual Background. So congratulations, Victoria. And please, if you wouldn't mind asking your question live, we have just a few seconds, if you wouldn't mind being brief.
Okay, I think I have sound now. Yeah, hi, thank you, first of all, Dana.
Well, thank you for participating with the background.
My question, Noah, was I'm on the GC side as well as Timothy. And one of the things that we've really been working on is better facilitation between our side and your side during that project phase. So have you noticed any difference, with the projects you've used BIMtrack on? Have you had less issues kind of down the road as your GC is doing that final trade coordination? And then kind of as a follow-up, do you think that the workflow of being able to assign could be something that you would consider implementing to facilitate that coordination? Like, I do meetings with my architects and engineering teams. So instead of me, emailing you a PDF, if we use BIMtrack, and then we both could be in our models on the meeting, or is that getting kind of too far into the model situation?
No, that's exactly how we used it. I mean,
Awesome.
I'll admit, I'm not too proud to announce it. The first time we got BIMtrack, we were on a project where no coordination effort had been done, and we were about a month away from 100% CDs, and everyone was so focused on trying to get the job done that the step hadn't happened, and we realized like this was going to be a real problem. And so trying to figure out how, with a month left in construction documents, how we could do it all and really look at everything efficiently, and make the changes and keep on track of all the issues and how we need to fix them. And so it wasn't a series of emails. It wasn't a 500 instance report that everyone got that people start glazing their eyes over. And that was why we had opened it, and it had such a huge success on the project team that it kept using it long into even the CA process on like additional issues, tracking some of those things internally to make sure changes were done. It really helped we had like almost no work at that project. There was such little found by the general contractor. It was a huge success, and then also when the project wrapped up, there was almost nothing we had left to do to get the final model delivery prepared to go out. It was just it was one of those things where everyone on that team was like fully converted. It was like, we want this on every project going forward, and I wasn't gonna argue like.
No, that's fantastic to hear, because I think that that's one of the biggest issues that we have is, you know, when you do have a project where someone pushed so fast, then you end up with all these issues, but then it becomes, you know, you're butting heads. And I feel like something like BIMTrack could smooth that workflow and kind of get more towards that sort of design build relationship, which in an ideal world, even if it's, you know, a traditional bid by build project, that's what I hope to achieve with all of my teams. And I feel like how you guys are using this would transition really smoothly into work with a GC. So
yeah,
that's awesome to hear that it actually worked.
And
Thank
you know,
you.
you don't want to
guys.
hear after like the third coordination meeting that the reason something hasn't been resolved is because someone doesn't have Navisworks installed on their machine. But that's happened before. It's like, well, we had the plugin installed for Revit. I know you've got Revit, so get to work. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, congratulations again, Victoria, and thank you so much for participating with us today. Thank you also, Tim and Jacob, for providing feedback and asking questions, and of course, everybody else who chatted with us. And a special thanks to Noah and David for presenting today. I hope everyone was able to benefit from today's discussion. And we will all see you next month for our next meeting. So please fill out the survey. We really do utilize those. We want to hear your feedback. And we'd love to hear any topics that you have, either that you would like to present or like you'd like to see presented on the BIM XT network. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.